They said the mountains of the north hold no mercy, that no man could survive a winter like that, not even a soldier. But they did not know about the man who still carried faith in his heart, or the dog who would walk through fire and ice just to keep him alive. Jack Miller had already lost everything: his home, his comrades, his peace. Yet one stormy night, when the world went silent, his loyal companion Duke led him toward something buried beneath the snow. A secret built by a forgotten man. A place where warmth was born from sound, and kindness could light even the darkest night. Through the storms, they faced greed, loss, and doubt. Through it all, they found hope again, not in gold or miracles, but in people who still believed in love, in loyalty, in grace. By the time the snow melted, Jack had built more than a shelter. He had built a home for every soul the cold world had forgotten. So listen closely and let this story guide you through the frost and the silence. Because sometimes the smallest act of mercy can open a door to heaven. May this tale warm your heart tonight. If you believe in kindness, share this story, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can keep the fire burning for those who still walk through the storm. The northern wind swept across the valley like a silent tide. Snow hung thick in the air, muffling every sound except the faint hum of the old engine. Beyond the frozen pines, the world was white and endless, a desert made of ice. Inside a dented silver pickup parked near the tree line, a man sat hunched over the steering wheel, his breath rising in small clouds that vanished before reaching the cracked glass. Jack Miller was 46 years old, broad-shouldered but worn down by years of hard labor and harder winters. His hazel hair was streaked with gray around the temples, and a thin beard ran along his jawline like a shadow that never quite left. His hands were rough, scarred from tools and shrapnel alike, and his eyes carried that quiet distance that soldiers often brought home and never set down. Once long ago, he had been a combat engineer in the Army, trained to build bridges, clear debris, and fix what war had broken. Now he spent his days fixing things that no one valued. Odd jobs in small towns, where people forgot his name before the next snowfall. In the passenger seat lay Duke, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a coat the color of ash and gold. His fur shimmered faintly in the dim light, thick around the neck, like a lion mane. His amber eyes were sharp yet calm, watching every move of his human with unspoken understanding. Duke had once served as a rescue dog in the Rockies, trained to find the lost and the buried. During one mission, a landslide took 2 men from their unit. Duke was the one who found them, lifeless under the snow. Jack had been there too, digging with frozen hands, whispering apologies into the wind. That night became the quiet wound both carried. Since then, they never worked apart. The truck rattled once and then went silent. Jack turned the key again. Nothing but a hollow click. He tried once more, then stopped. The gas gauge rested below empty. The heater had already died an hour ago. His fingers were stiff inside the torn gloves, the bones of his right hand still aching where metal had once sliced through muscle. He reached for the blanket behind the seat and wrapped it over Duke. The dog nudged his elbow, as if to say it was fine. Jack gave a dry laugh that sounded more like a cough. The night outside deepened. Snowflakes hit the windshield, slow and relentless, erasing the last traces of road. He rubbed his hands together, felt the ache crawl up his wrists. The pain reminded him he was still alive, though he was not sure why. There had been a time when he believed in starting over. maybe finding work down south, maybe calling the daughter who no longer returned his letters. But months turned into years, and hope became another bill he could not afford. Duke stirred beside him, ears twitching. Jack turned his head. The dog gave a low growl, soft but certain. His nose lifted, sniffing toward the forest. Jack frowned. There was nothing but white outside. Still, Duke instincts had never been wrong. The German shepherd stood, pressing his front paws on the dashboard, eyes fixed on the dark pines. Then he barked 3 times, sharp and even, the same rhythm he used during search missions when he caught the scent of something human. Jack felt a ripple of unease. He glanced at the frost building around the window edges. The temperature was dropping fast. The battery light flickered once and died. Inside the cab, it was colder than he wanted to admit. He looked at Duke, at the dog's steady amber gaze. "All right, old boy," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "Lead the way." He opened the door. The wind cut through him like glass. The snow reached up to his calves as he stepped out, pulling his coat tighter. Duke jumped down first, his paws silent on the packed ice, his body moving with effortless grace. Together, they started walking into the storm. The headlights of the truck faded behind them, swallowed by white. The forest loomed ahead, black trunks rising through the snow like bones. Each breath burned in Jack's lungs. The path was invisible, yet Duke moved with purpose, pausing every few feet to test the air. Jack followed, trusting the animal more than the compass he no longer carried. The sound of his boots crunching in snow mingled with Duke's low breathing. He thought of all the winters he had survived and the ones he had not really lived through. He remembered sleeping in trucks like this after the army, fixing engines for gas stations that never paid on time, spending Christmas alone at rest stops where the vending machines played holiday songs out of tune. Somewhere along the line, life had become a series of half-repaired things, and he was one of them. The wind grew louder, swirling snow into spirals that stung his face. Duke stopped suddenly and turned his head. Through the storm, Jack saw something faint, an orange flicker, like firelight buried in mist. He blinked to be sure it was not a trick of exhaustion. The glow stayed. Duke barked once, quick and confident. "You see it too, huh?" Jack said more to himself than to the dog. They trudged forward. The snow was deeper now, reaching his knees. He stumbled once, caught himself on a birch trunk. The bark was smooth and cold, the kind that reminded him of the plywood walls of his childhood home in Ohio. His father used to say that real men worked until their hands bled, then worked some more. The old man died with nothing but debts, and Jack had followed the same road without meaning to. A few minutes later, the glow grew brighter. Through the curtain of falling snow emerged the outline of a small wooden cabin. Smoke rose in thin ribbons from its chimney, and a faint yellow light spilled from a single window. It looked almost unreal, a postcard from a life Jack no longer believed in. Duke quickened his pace, tail low, but steady. He stopped at the porch, sniffing the air, then looked back at Jack as if asking permission. Jack climbed the steps, breath ragged. The boards creaked under his boots. He hesitated before knocking. His reflection in the window startled him, eyes hollow, beard frozen white. A stranger who looked far older than 46. He raised his hand and knocked twice. For a moment, nothing moved inside. Then slow footsteps. The door opened just enough for warm air to slip through. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, but stooped, perhaps 70 or more, wrapped in a thick wool coat that had seen better decades. His hair was silver and thin, his face deeply lined, but not unkind. Eyes the color of faded blue glass studied Jack with calm curiosity. "Evening, son," the old man said. "You look like winter found you before you found shelter." Jack swallowed, voice rough from the cold. "Just needed a place to wait it out, sir." The old man nodded once. "No one waits it out alone in weather like this. Come in before the frost decides otherwise." Jack hesitated. He had been turned away too many times to trust kindness easily. But the smell of wood smoke and the warmth that slipped through the crack of the door were too strong to ignore. He glanced down at Duke, who stood still, watching the old man with silent approval. Inside the cabin glowed with soft amber light from a cast-iron stove. Books lined the walls. Herbs hung from the beams. A quilt rested on a rocking chair near the fire. It felt like a place built by hands that knew patience. The old man gestured to the chair. "Sit down, son. You and your friend look half frozen. Name is Walter Green. Been up here longer than most maps remember." Jack nodded, easing into the chair. "Jack Miller. This here is Duke." Walter smiled faintly. "Good name. Dog looks like he understands more than most men I have met." Jack managed a tired smile. "He does. Saved my life more times than I can count." Walter poured 2 cups of tea from a kettle that hissed gently on the stove. The scent of mint and honey filled the room. He handed one to Jack, then settled into his chair. The wind howled outside, but inside the sound faded, replaced by the crackle of fire and the steady breathing of the dog, now curled near the stove. Walter studied the flames for a long time before speaking again. "You have seen a few storms, have not you, son? Enough to know they always take more than they give." Walter nodded, eyes half closed. "True words. But some storms bring what we did not know we were missing." Jack looked into his cup. The warmth spread through his fingers, then deeper, into places that had been cold for years. He did not know yet that this night would change everything. That beyond the kindness of an old man and the loyalty of a dog, the forest itself was listening. And somewhere under the snow, something ancient had just begun to stir. The night storm had passed, but the cold still clung to the world like a second skin. Dawn came slow and gray. Snow covered the forest floor in silence, and the sky hung low with pale mist. Inside the wooden cabin, a faint warmth flickered from the small stove, where dry pine cracked and glowed. Jack Miller did not remember falling asleep. The last thing he recalled was the door opening and the face of an old man framed by light. His body had gone numb by then, carried only by the sound of Duke barking and the stranger voice calling them inside. When he woke the next morning, his mind took a moment to believe that the fire and the roof were real. The cabin was small and neat. A handmade quilt covered him. His boots sat drying near the hearth, and the smell of mint tea drifted through the air. Across the room, Duke lay on a rug, his golden black fur still damp from melted snow. The dog lifted his head when Jack stirred, eyes calm but watchful. "You are awake now?" came a voice near the stove. The man speaking moved slowly, stooped but steady. He wore a thick gray sweater, and his hands were rough from years of work. His face was lined deeply, the kind of lines that come from both laughter and loss. His hair was white and thin, but his eyes were clear, gray-blue, like the ice outside. "You can call me Walter Green," he said. "Found you half frozen at my door last night. Your dog saved your life more than once, I reckon." Jack tried to sit up. His body protested, but he managed to nod. Thank you. We were lost out there. The truck died miles back. Happens often this time of year? Walter said, pouring tea into a tin cup. The forest likes to test who belongs and who does not. He handed Jack the cup. Drink slow. It will wake the blood. The tea was hot and sharp with mint, and something bitter underneath. Jack felt it burn down his throat and spread through his chest. He looked around again. The room was filled with small things that spoke of long solitude. Books stacked in corners, jars of herbs hanging from beams, a map of the valley drawn by hand pinned to the wall. Everything had a reason to be there. You live here alone? Jack asked. Walter nodded. 20 winters and counting. The world outside makes too much noise. Out here, it is quiet enough to listen to what matters. Jack studied him. There was strength still in the old man's shoulders, though his movements were careful. He had the air of someone who had built things once, the kind of man who carried skill like a second nature. You must get lonely out here, Jack said. Walter gave a faint smile. Solitude is not the same as loneliness. Out here I still have the forest to talk to. The trees listen better than people most days. Jack smiled back, though faintly. He looked toward Duke, who was now sitting up, tail sweeping the floor. The dog seemed completely at ease, as if he trusted this place already. After breakfast, Walter stepped outside to fetch wood. Jack followed him. The snow was knee-deep, and the sky a dull silver. The old man moved with surprising balance for his age. His breath rose in steady clouds. You used to work in town, Jack asked. Long ago, Walter said. I was an engineer for a government project. That feels like another lifetime now. What kind of project? Walter hesitated, then set the logs down beside the door. A strange one. We were trying to build a shelter that could stay warm without fire, sound instead of flame. That was back in '57, when men thought they could outsmart the end of the world. Jack frowned. Sound that gives heat, not noise, Walter said quietly. Pure tone. The earth has its own music. If you match it right, the vibration carries warmth. We built a chamber beneath these woods. They called it the Garden of Still Heat. Jack let out a slow breath. That sounds like something out of a story. Maybe it is, Walter replied, but I have seen it. They sealed it when funding ran dry, said it was too strange, too costly. But some things you do not forget. I stayed behind. Sometimes when the wind dies, I can still hear it hum beneath the snow. The words settled heavy in the cold air. Jack studied the man beside him. He did not seem mad. There was clarity in his voice, a calm conviction of someone who had lived long enough to know truth does not always sound logical. Back inside the cabin, they sat near the stove again. Walter poured fresh tea. The firelight painted gold across his face, tracing the wrinkles like roads on a map. You have the look of a man who has seen war, he said. Jack nodded. Years ago. Afghanistan. Did you come back whole? Jack stared into the fire. No one does. He thought of the nights spent under burning skies, the sound of things falling apart, the smell that never left his memory. Then he thought of coming home and finding nothing waiting. War had followed him quietly, sitting behind him in every empty room. Walter did not press further. He only nodded slowly, as if he already knew. We build walls to keep the world out, but sometimes those same walls trap the warmth inside until it dies. Jack looked up. You speak like a preacher, more like an old fool who has listened too long to the earth talking. The two men shared a faint laugh, the kind that softens silence. The sound felt like a bridge between two distant lives. As afternoon faded, Walter showed Jack a wooden box on the table. He opened it gently. Inside lay small tools, old blueprints, and a strange symbol carved into the lid. 7 circles forming a pattern of stars. Jack traced it with his finger. "What is this?" "A reminder," Walter said. 7 points for 7 tones. The key to balance. It is what kept that chamber breathing. He closed the box and stared at it for a long time before adding softly, "Maybe one day, someone will find it again. Someone who still believes that warmth belongs to everyone." Jack said nothing. He only watched the old man and wondered what kind of faith survives alone in a frozen forest. That night, they ate soup thick with barley and dried herbs. "Thee come?" Wind outside whispered against the walls, but inside it was peaceful. Duke slept near the fire, paws twitching in dreams. Walter hummed a tune low and slow. The sound vibrated faintly through the floorboards. Jack felt it travel up his spine. It was gentle, steady, almost like a heartbeat. "You hear that?" Walter asked. Jack nodded. "What is it?" "Just sound," the old man said with a smile. "But if you listen close, it feels like the world breathing." Later, as the fire dimmed, Jack lay on the cot near the wall. Sleep came easier than he expected. The warmth from the stove and the rhythm of the humming filled the cabin with calm. Before drifting off, he saw Walter still sitting near the fire, his eyes far away, but peaceful. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and endless. And somewhere beneath the forest, the faint hum of the buried chamber stirred again, waiting. The morning began quietly. Outside, the forest was white again, calm after a long snow. The sky held a pale silver glow, and smoke from the cabin chimney rose in a thin, steady line. Inside, the air was warmer than the night before. The smell of mint and wood ash lingered like a memory. Jack Miller woke on the cot near the wall. For a moment, he stayed still, listening to the crackle of the fire. Duke was lying close to the stove, breathing slow, his tail twitching in his sleep. Everything felt calm, too calm, the kind of stillness that comes after something sacred. He turned toward the chair near the stove. Walter Green sat there, just as he had the night before, the same coat draped around his shoulders, hands resting in his lap. The old man looked peaceful, his eyes half closed as if dozing in the warmth. But something about the air was wrong. It felt too still, too silent. Jack rose and crossed the room. His breath caught. The color in Walter's face was gone. His body was still, the warmth that had once filled the room now fading from his skin. The teacup beside him was cold. Jack stood there for a long moment, unable to speak. He had not known the man long, yet the loss hit him as if the earth itself had shifted. Duke walked to the chair, sniffed Walter's hand, then sat down beside him, head bowed, silent and knowing. Jack knelt, feeling the rough wool of Walter's coat. The old man's eyes were closed now, a faint trace of a smile frozen on his lips. There was no struggle, no pain, only stillness. He had gone quietly, like someone walking into sleep. On the table beside the chair lay a folded paper and a small piece of dark metal. Jack picked up the paper first. The handwriting was uneven, but strong. Jack Miller. If you are reading this, I have gone where the forest hums in peace. Do not let sorrow turn you cold. The world always finds new hands for its unfinished work. There is a key beside this letter. It does not open doors, made by man. When the ground hums and Duke listens, follow him. If the earth calls, listen. The warmth you find is not mine to keep. Share it. Jack's hands trembled as he held the letter. He looked down at the small object beside it. A key, heavy and smooth, carved with 7 tiny stars. When he turned it in his palm, it caught the faint morning light and glimmered like frost. The metal was warm. He whispered softly, "You left me your secret, didn't you, old man?" Duke watched him, tail still, eyes steady. The dog sniffed the key once, then looked toward the door. Jack could see the focus in his posture, the quiet alertness that meant the animal was listening to something beyond human hearing. "All right, buddy, I hear you." He looked again at Walter's body, the man who had opened his door to a stranger in a storm, who had spoken of sound and warmth and faith. Jack covered him gently with a wool blanket, pressing the edges down as if tucking in someone for sleep. Outside, the wind had slowed, but the air carried the faint scent of pine and snow. Jack found a shovel near the porch and walked behind the cabin. There, under a tall birch, he began to dig. The ground was frozen hard, the soil breaking in dull cracks beneath the blade. His arms ached, but he did not stop. Duke stayed beside him, watching every motion. It took hours to finish. When the hole was ready, Jack went back inside, lifted Walter's body with care, and carried him out beneath the pale light. The old man was lighter than he expected, as if the forest had already claimed part of him. Jack laid him down, folded his hands across his chest, and whispered a few words that he had not said since his soldier days. They were not prayers, not exactly, but promises. He said he would listen. He said he would finish what Walter began. When it was done, he stood in silence. Snow began to fall again, thin flakes that landed softly on the fresh mound. Duke pressed his nose to the snow, then let out a low, mournful sound that faded into the trees. Back inside the cabin, Jack sat at the table and unfolded the letter again. His eyes lingered on one line. "If the earth calls, listen." He thought of the strange hum Walter had spoken of, the warmth that traveled through sound. He had heard something like it last night, faint, steady, like a heartbeat under the floorboards. He looked down at Duke. The dog was standing now, tail low, ears twitching toward the ground. Jack knelt beside him. "You hear it again, don't you?" The dog gave a quiet bark, 3 short sounds, the same rhythm as before in the storm, when he had led Jack through the snow. Jack felt the floor vibrate faintly under his knees. It was not the wind. It came from deeper, pulsing slow and steady. He took the key from his pocket. The metal pulsed with warmth, almost alive. He stared at it, feeling the strange rhythm move through him like a second heartbeat. "If the earth calls, listen." The old man's words echoed again, louder now, not in his ears, but in his chest. Jack's eyes closed. He could feel Duke pressing against his side, the dog's breathing syncing with the faint vibration. It was as if something beneath the cabin was stirring, not a machine, but something older. Jack rose and stepped outside. The forest was silent except for the whisper of falling snow. He stood still, waiting. The hum came again, faint but clear, rising from the ground beneath his boots. He looked back at the cabin, the light from the window glowing soft against the snow. He thought of Walter, of his calm eyes and gentle voice. The man had built something extraordinary and then spent his life guarding it. Now that burden was his. He closed his hand around the key. "All right, old man," he whispered. "I will listen." That night, Jack and Duke stayed by the fire. The hum continued faintly through the floor, a rhythm that neither of them could explain. Jack did not sleep much. His thoughts moved between grief and wonder. The key rested beside him on the table, glowing faintly in the firelight, as if remembering where it came from. When dawn came, the snow outside shimmered silver. The forest seemed alive again, breathing through the wind. Duke stood by the door, waiting. Jack followed his gaze toward the deep woods, where the birches bent under the new snow. Somewhere beneath that ground, the hum waited. He took the key and slipped it into his pocket. The letter he folded carefully and placed inside his jacket. One last time, he looked toward the fresh grave under the birch tree. Rest easy, Walter. I will find it. The wind carried his words away, and the forest answered with silence, the kind that means it is heard and understood. The afternoon sun broke weakly through the clouds, throwing long, pale light across the snow. The forest was quiet again, but the silence felt different now, heavier, as if it were listening. The cabin stood like a single memory in a world made of ice. Jack Miller had spent the past few days keeping the fire alive, fixing the roof, and feeding Duke. Each night the hum beneath the floor returned, faint but steady, like the heartbeat of something waiting. He had buried Walter Green 3 days ago under the birch tree, marking the grave with a flat stone. Since then, Jack had lived between work and thought, half in the present, half in the voice of the man who was gone. He had read Walter's letter many times, tracing the words until they felt carved into his hands. He did not know yet what the key meant, but he felt its weight in his pocket with every step. That afternoon, Duke suddenly lifted his head. The dog's ears twitched, eyes narrowing toward the forest path. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Jack looked up from the woodpile. The air was still. Then came the sound of tires crunching on frozen dirt. A dark green pickup truck emerged through the trees, stopping just short of the cabin. A man climbed out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black wool coat and boots still dusted with road salt. His hair was dark blonde, streaked with gray at the temples, and his jaw carried 2 days of stubble. His movements were sharp and certain, the kind of confidence that came from a life of getting what he wanted. He took off his gloves slowly and looked around, his eyes scanning the cabin, the grave marker, and finally resting on Jack. "You must be the one who found old Walter," he said, voice deep but edged. "Name is Randall Pike. I am family." Jack stood still, his hands resting on the handle of the axe he had been using to split wood. "Family, you say?" Randall nodded. "Cousin on his wife's side, though we lost touch long ago. Heard from town that the old man passed. Thought I would come see the place, pay respects." Duke growled again, low and steady. The sound made Randall glance down sharply. He stepped back once, forcing a tight smile. "Nice dog you got there." Jack said nothing. He studied Randall more carefully. There was something restless behind the man's eyes, a glint too cold to hide behind politeness. His clothes were too clean for a man coming out of the woods. His truck had fresh paint and city plates. "You came from town," Jack said at last. "That is a long way for a visit." Randall shrugged. "Walter and I go back a long way. He always said this land was special. Guess I wanted to see it for myself." Jack felt the meaning under those words. The land, not the man. He nodded toward the forest. "Walter is buried out back. You can pay your respects there." Randall's smile thinned. "I will, sure. But first, I would like to come inside, if you do not mind." Duke stepped between them, teeth showing now. The growl deepened, vibrating through the still air. Randall froze. "Easy there, friend," he muttered. Jack placed a hand on Duke's neck. "He will not bite unless I say so. You can pay your respects outside. There is nothing for you in here." Randall's eyes flicked toward the cabin door, then to Jack's pocket where the outline of the key faintly pressed against the fabric. He was quick to notice small things, too quick for comfort. "You know," he said, lowering his voice. "Walter mentioned something to me once years ago. Some kind of project under this land. He said it could change everything. Heat from the ground or something like that. Sounded like nonsense, but I hear the government might pay good money for old designs like that." Jack's jaw tightened. He felt Duke's muscles tense under his hand. The air between them seemed to shrink. "You heard wrong," Jack said. "There's nothing here but snow and silence." Randall gave a short laugh. "Maybe, but sometimes silence hides more than it should." Jack stepped closer, his voice low. "You should leave." Randall tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "You think you can stop me?" Before Jack could answer, Duke barked sharply. The sound broke through the still air like a warning. The dog's fur bristled, his stance ready. Randall flinched and took a step back. "All right, no need for trouble," he said. "I will go pay my respects then." He turned, walking toward the birch tree where the snow lay smooth over Walter's grave. For a moment he stood there, looking down, but his hands stayed buried in his coat pockets. Then he crouched slightly, brushing the snow aside as if expecting to find something hidden beneath. Jack watched from the cabin door. He could see it now. Randall was not here for family, not for grief. He was here for what Walter had left behind. When Randall stood again, his face had changed. The mask of civility was gone. His eyes were sharp, calculating. He looked back toward the cabin. "I will be back," he said flatly. "A man alone in a place like this ought to have company." He walked to his truck, boots crunching on the snow, and drove off down the forest road. The sound of the engine faded until only wind remained. Jack stood there for a long while. The sky had begun to darken, the pale sun sinking behind the trees. He went to the door and closed it, setting the latch firmly. Duke sat beside him, ears still pointed toward the road. That night the hum returned stronger than before. It moved through the floor, deep and slow. Jack sat by the fire, the key warm in his hand. He could feel the pull of something beneath the ground, something that was his now to protect. He thought of Randall, of the greed in his eyes, and he knew the world would come knocking again. He looked at Duke, the dog's gaze steady and fierce. "We keep it safe, buddy. Whatever it is, we keep it safe." The dog wagged his tail once and lay down near the fire. Jack stared into the flames. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the tracks of Randall Pike as if the forest itself wished to forget him. Morning came pale and still. The sky hung low, thick with clouds that seemed to rest on the tops of the trees. The forest glowed faintly blue under the weight of snow. The world was quiet except for the faint creak of frozen branches and the soft rhythm of Duke breathing near the fire. Jack Miller sat at the wooden table, the key lying in front of him. Its metal gleamed faintly, even without sunlight. He had not slept much. His mind had been filled with Walter's words and the sound that rose every night beneath the floor, slow and steady like a distant heartbeat. He turned the key in his fingers, feeling its warmth against his skin. The 7 carved stars seemed to shimmer faintly. Duke lifted his head, ears pricked. The dog was 5 years old, strong and sleek, his coat dark gold fading to black along the spine. His eyes were amber and alive with focus. Jack had trained him since he was a pup, and after the war, Duke had become more than a companion. He was the reason Jack had survived the long silence that followed when the world stopped making sense. Now the dog was standing, muscles tensed. Jack noticed it instantly. Duke rarely reacted without cause. He followed the animal's gaze to the window. The forest outside looked unchanged, but the air felt different, as if the ground itself had drawn a breath. Jack rose, slipping the key into his coat pocket. "All right, buddy, show me." Duke barked once, sharp and sure, then trotted to the door. Jack opened it, and a rush of cold air filled the cabin. Snow stretched endlessly in every direction, unbroken and clean. The dog started walking toward the woods, each step careful but determined. Jack followed close behind, boots crunching softly in the snow. The air was heavy with stillness. The only sound was the whisper of Duke's paws breaking the surface. They moved past the birch tree where Walter rested. Jack touched the gravestone gently as he passed, murmuring a quiet promise. Duke led him deeper into the forest, down a slope where the snow grew deeper. The trees thinned, and ahead lay a small clearing, perfectly circular, where the snow looked untouched. No wind had marked it, no animal had crossed it. It was smooth and bright, as if shaped by something beneath. Duke stopped at the center and began to paw the ground. His tail wagged slowly, ears forward, eyes fixed on the snow. Jack approached, heart beating faster. He could hear it now, faint and deep, a low vibration that rose from the earth like a hum beneath a heartbeat. He knelt and pressed his glove against the snow. The ground felt warm. He looked at Duke. The dog's eyes glimmered with alertness. Jack took the key from his pocket. "You think this is it, don't you?" Duke barked softly, then sat, staring at the spot where the snow seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Jack hesitated, then held the key out in his hand. The hum grew louder. The 7 stars carved into the metal glowed faintly gold. Then Duke barked again, louder this time. 3 sharp sounds. The vibration beneath them shifted. The snow trembled, cracking in a circle around where the dog sat. A faint line appeared, forming the shape of a door. Jack stepped back, his breath visible in the cold air. The snow fell inward, revealing a square outline made of stone. Beneath it, a faint orange glow shone upward through the cracks. Warm air rose, carrying the smell of earth and metal. He stared, frozen between disbelief and wonder. Duke whined softly and looked up at him as if waiting for permission. "All right, old boy. Let's see what you found." Jack knelt beside the opening. The stone surface beneath was smooth, carved with the same pattern of 7 stars that marked the key. He placed the key into the center of the design. It fit perfectly, the stars aligning one by one. The hum deepened. The ground shuddered once, then began to move. Snow slid away as the stone sank downward, revealing a narrow passage glowing faintly with golden light. Warm air rose from below, carrying a low sound that was neither wind nor machine, but something alive. Jack's breath caught in his throat. He looked at Duke. The dog wagged his tail once, then stepped forward to the edge, peering down into the light. "You sure about this, buddy?" Duke barked once and began to descend. Paws steady on the stone steps that had appeared along the walls. Jack followed, his hand brushing against the smooth surface. The walls gave off warmth, like sunlight trapped in stone. The passage spiraled downward, the hum surrounding them on all sides. The light shifted from gold to soft white, pulsing gently like a living heartbeat. Jack felt the cold leave his bones. He had not felt warmth like this in years, not even from fire. At the bottom, the passage opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling curved like the inside of a dome, smooth and perfect. The air shimmered faintly, and the walls glowed with slow waves of light. At the center stood a pool of water, still and bright, reflecting the light in endless ripples. Duke moved forward, sniffing the air, his tail wagging slowly. Jack followed, staring in awe. The chamber was silent except for the hum that filled the air like the breath of the earth itself. He could feel it in his chest, in his pulse, in the rhythm of his own heartbeat. He knelt beside the pool. The water was warm to the touch. The light from it painted his hands gold. He thought of Walter, of his quiet conviction that warmth could live without fire. It was real. The garden of still heat was real. Jack whispered softly. "You did it, old man. You really did it." Duke lay beside him, eyes half closed, content. Jack looked at the dog and smiled. Maybe the world still had a few miracles left. He stood and turned toward the passage, staring up at the faint square of daylight far above. For the first time in years, he felt no cold, no loneliness, no fear. Only a strange, quiet certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Above them, the snow began to fall again, sealing the opening. The forest went silent once more, guarding the secret beneath its roots. The morning light above the forest was dim, filtered through heavy snow clouds. Deep underground, the air was still and golden, carrying a quiet warmth that seemed to breathe. The chamber beneath the earth pulsed faintly with light, its stone walls alive with a rhythm that matched the beating of a heart. Jack Miller sat near the pool at the center of the chamber. The water shimmered softly, its glow reflecting across his tired face. Duke lay beside him, head resting on his paws, ears twitching every few seconds at the low hum that filled the room. The warmth around them was gentle, wrapping them both like a living thing. Jack had spent the night exploring every corner of the chamber. The walls were carved with lines that curved like sound waves, and when he touched them, he could feel a vibration run through his fingers. It was Walter Green's design brought to life. A room that created heat from sound. A miracle built by human hands and forgotten by time. He looked at the 7-pointed mark in the center of the floor where the key had once rested. The air around it still shimmered faintly. Jack found himself speaking softly, as if the room could hear. "You really built it, old man. You turned music into warmth." Duke lifted his head and looked toward the stairway leading upward. His ears pricked, his tail stiffened. Jack followed his gaze. The hum of the room changed, a faint tremor running through the floor. It was not danger, but something different, something alive above them. "You hear that, buddy?" The dog gave a short bark and stood. Jack rose too, grabbing his coat. The warmth of the chamber clung to him even as he climbed the stone steps. When he reached the opening, daylight cut through the snow. The storm had returned. Wind whipped across the clearing, carrying fine flakes that stung his face. Duke barked again, louder, then ran forward into the white haze. Jack followed, boots sinking deep into the drifts. The forest was half hidden behind curtains of falling snow. Then he saw movement near the edge of the clearing, a small figure stumbling through the storm, collapsing into the snow. Jack ran toward it. The figure was a girl, no older than 10, her coat torn, her hair tangled with ice. Her face was pale, lips blue, eyes barely open. He knelt beside her, brushing snow from her cheeks. Her skin was cold as glass. Hey, hey, stay with me, he said, voice low but urgent. The girl shivered weakly, trying to speak, but no sound came. Duke pressed close, his body against hers, tail low but wagging gently. Jack could feel the heat from the dog's fur warming the child through her torn coat. He lifted her carefully, wrapping her in his own jacket. She was light, too light, like something the wind could carry away. He looked around, but saw no one else. No tracks, except hers. Come on, Duke. We are taking her below. The dog barked once and led the way. Jack followed through the storm, the girl limp in his arms. When they reached the clearing, the snow under their feet began to hum again. The stone door shimmered open at their approach, releasing a wave of warm air. Jack stepped inside, and the chamber welcomed them with golden light. He laid the girl beside the pool and knelt to check her breathing. It was shallow, but steady. Duke lay next to her, curling his body close to hers for warmth. Jack soaked a rag in the warm water and wiped the ice from her face and hair. Slowly, color began to return to her skin. She opened her eyes after a few minutes. They were green, wide, and filled with confusion. You are safe now? Jack said gently. What is your name? Her voice came as a whisper. Lily. Jack nodded. All right, Lily. You are safe. We will get you warm. She looked around the chamber, her eyes widening. Is this a dream? No, he said, smiling faintly. But it feels like one. As he spoke, the hum in the walls changed again. The light brightened, glowing richer and warmer. The chamber itself seemed to respond to her presence, as if recognizing the act of kindness that had brought her here. Jack felt the warmth deepen around them, the air thickening with gentle heat. He looked up toward the ceiling, where waves of light moved like ripples across water. He remembered Walter's words, warmth without fire, heat through sound. Maybe the room was more than a machine. Maybe it was alive in some way, built not only from stone, but from intention. He glanced at Duke, who watched him calmly, tail wagging once in quiet approval. Jack reached out and rested his hand on the dog's head. You did good, buddy. Lily sat up slowly, still weak, but smiling now. The warmth had flushed her cheeks. She reached out to touch the glowing wall beside her. It feels alive, she said softly. Jack nodded. Maybe it is. He told her they would stay there until the storm passed. He shared food from his pack, small pieces of bread and dried meat. Lily ate quietly, looking around the chamber in wonder. She asked about Duke, and Jack told her everything, about finding the cabin, about Walter, about the secret beneath the snow. She listened without interrupting, her eyes full of a kind of hope that Jack had not seen in a long time. When she finally spoke again, her voice was stronger. My father went hunting before the storm. He never came back. I tried to find him. Then everything turned white. Jack looked at her, his chest tightening. We will find him, he said quietly. But first we keep you safe. As the hours passed, the storm above raged, but inside the warmth grew even stronger. The hum deepened. The walls glowed brighter, and the air shimmered with gold. It was as if the room was feeding on their kindness, growing warmer with every act of care. By nightfall, Lily was asleep beside Duke, her head resting on the dog's fur. Jack sat beside the pool, watching the light play across the walls. For the first time since Walter died, He felt something close to peace. He looked down at his hands, then at the key that still rested in his pocket. "You were right, old man," he whispered. "Warmth does not come from fire. It comes from hearts that still care." The chamber answered with a faint pulse of light, steady and alive. The morning sky was pale and heavy with clouds, the forest still covered in a thick layer of frost. The wind whispered through the trees, soft but cold, carrying the weight of a coming storm. Inside the cabin, near the hidden chamber, a thin curl of smoke rose from the chimney, marking the only sign of life in that silent white world. Jack Miller sat near the hearth, his hands wrapped around a tin mug of coffee gone cold. The room smelled of wood and ash. Duke lay near the door, half asleep, his chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. Lily sat at the table, drawing something on a scrap of paper Walter had once used for his notes. Her small fingers moved carefully, tracing the outline of a man, a dog, and a house beneath falling snow. Jack watched her quietly, lost in thought. He had not slept much since the storm ended. The warmth from the underground room still lingered in his mind. Sometimes, at night, he could almost hear it hum beneath the floor like a heartbeat. The old man's creation was alive, and now he had to protect it. The sound of tires crunching over frozen gravel broke the silence. Duke lifted his head, ears alert. Jack stood, stepping to the window. Through the fog glass, a black SUV appeared at the tree line. The vehicle stopped near the edge of the clearing, and a man stepped out. It was Randall Pike. He was wrapped in a thick, fur-lined coat, his hair slicked back and dusted with snow. His jaw was rough with a few days of unshaven beard, and his eyes, pale gray, carried the same coldness as the winter around him. There was a camera slung around his neck, and two younger men behind him, carrying equipment. Jack recognized the logo on the side of their van, a media crew. Duke growled low, standing at the door, fur bristling. Jack placed a calming hand on the dog's neck. "Easy, buddy." The door opened before Randall could knock. Jack stood in the frame, calm but steady, the weight of the past days showing in his eyes. "Morning, Randall." Randall smiled thinly. "Morning. I see you have settled in quite well." Jack said nothing. Randall gestured toward the forest behind him. "We are here to document what Walter Green built. The world deserves to know about it. You can't keep something like that buried forever." Jack crossed his arms. "You mean you want to sell it?" Randall laughed softly, his breath fogging in the cold air. "I am a businessman, Jack, not a thief. There is value in knowledge. There are universities, investors, people who would pay for this kind of discovery." Jack's voice was quiet but hard. Walter built that place to protect life, not to make money. Randall's smile faded. He stepped closer. "That old man built a miracle and died with it. Are you really going to let it rot underground?" Duke barked sharply, breaking the tension. From the corner of the yard, a new voice called out, "That is close enough, Mr. Pike." They turned to see Sheriff Clara Harris walking toward them, her brown coat dusted with snow. She was in her late 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, her auburn hair tied back beneath her hat. Her face carried the quiet authority of someone who had seen more winters than she cared to count. Years in law enforcement had carved patience into her, but her eyes, a clear shade of hazel, missed nothing. Randall straightened, his confident tone slipping slightly. "Sheriff, I am here on legal grounds." She stopped a few feet away, hand resting casually near her belt. Legal grounds do not include trespassing on registered property. Registered. Randall blinked. Jack said evenly. Walter left the land to me. Clara nodded. The county processed the papers last week. Everything here, above and below, is protected territory now. Randall's jaw clenched. You can't be serious. The sheriff tilted her head slightly. I am. And if you continue to bring a crew out here without permission, I will treat it as criminal intent. One of Randall's men stepped forward nervously, his camera half raised. Sir, maybe we should. Randall waved him off, but his voice shook with frustration. You think you can stop the truth from getting out? The sheriff met his gaze calmly. The truth is that an old man died trying to keep this place safe. The truth is that this veteran and his dog saved a child during the storm. Maybe that is the story worth telling. Lily appeared at the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. Her face was pale, but her eyes were bright. That's him, she said softly. The man from the woods. He tried to take something from the house. Clara looked back at Randall. You heard her. Randall's face drained of color. He took a step back, realizing there was no way to argue. The camera crew exchanged uneasy glances. Jack watched him quietly, feeling no anger now, only a kind of tired pity. You should leave, Randall. Some things are meant to stay quiet. Randall's lips tightened. You think this ends here? It already has, Jack said simply. For a long moment, the wind was the only sound. Then Randall turned away, his boots crunching through the snow. The men followed, packing their equipment in silence. The SUV door slammed, the engine started, and soon they were gone, the sound of tires fading into the distance. Clara let out a slow breath, watching the trees. He will not come back soon, she said. Jack nodded. Maybe not. The sheriff looked at him then, her expression softening. You did good, Jack. Walter would have been proud. He looked down at Duke, who stood quietly at his side, tail swaying once. Maybe he already is. Lily came out into the yard, holding something in her small hands. It was the drawing she had made that morning, the man and the dog beneath the snow. She held it out to Jack. This is for you. He took it gently. Thank you, Lily. The wind picked up, but the cold seemed softer now. Above the treetops, faint sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a pale glow across the cabin roof. Jack felt a warmth stir deep within him, the same warmth that lived beneath the earth, humming still in the chamber below. For the first time in many winters, he allowed himself to believe that the cold could not win. Snow fell softly over the valley, not in anger, but in peace. The storm had passed days ago, leaving the forest dressed in white silence. The cabin near the birch grove stood calm under the weak winter sun, smoke rising from its chimney like a slow prayer. Inside, the air was warm and alive with the crackle of fire. Jack Miller sat by the wooden table, his notebook open, the pen resting in his weathered hand. His face had grown leaner, his hair touched with more silver, but there was light in his gray-blue eyes now. Duke lay stretched before the hearth, his black and tan fur gleaming, head resting on his paws, ears half raised as if listening to the soft rhythm of the fire. The cabin had changed. What was once Walter's quiet refuge had become a place filled with life. Tools hung neatly on the walls, blankets folded over chairs, and near the window stood a wooden sign carved by Jack himself. It read, Winter Haven House. Beneath it, someone had etched smaller words with careful hands. Shelter for the lost and the cold. Outside the window, two travelers struggled through the snow toward the cabin. The man was middle-aged, wearing a torn coat and carrying a child wrapped in blankets. When Jack opened the door, the man's eyes widened with relief. He was tall, his cheeks hollow from hunger, his beard rough and uneven. The child's small face peeked out from the folds of the blanket, pale and silent. "Come in," Jack said softly. "The wind will not be kind today." The man nodded gratefully. "Thank you, sir." His voice cracked from exhaustion. He was Robert Hale, a miner from the North Hills. Months of unemployment and a sudden storm had driven him from his broken cabin. The boy in his arms was his son, Noah, no more than 6, frail, but with eyes bright as polished amber. Duke rose from the hearth, tail wagging once in greeting, then walked forward to sniff the child's hand before resting beside him. Robert knelt near the fire, holding Noah close. The boy's small hands reached toward the warmth as if discovering life again. Jack poured hot tea into metal cups and handed one to Robert. "You found the right place. No one leaves here cold." The man's eyes glistened. "I heard stories in town about a house that glows at night. I thought they were just tales." Jack smiled faintly. Some stories keep people alive long enough to find the truth. Lily entered from the back room, carrying an armful of firewood. Her hair, once tangled with frost, was now brushed neatly into braids. The pink in her cheeks had returned, and she wore one of Walter's old wool sweaters that reached past her hands. She placed the wood by the hearth and smiled at the new arrivals. "I told you, Jack, people would find us when they needed to." He nodded, his heart swelling with quiet pride. The warmth of this place was more than heat from fire or stone. It was something built from kindness, carried from one heart to another. As the evening deepened, the cabin filled with soft laughter, and the sound of life. The kettle sang on the stove. The walls seemed to hum faintly, as though the underground chamber below was listening and answering with its own pulse of warmth. Later, when Robert and his son had fallen asleep near the fire, Jack stepped outside. The night air was cold, but gentle. The moon hung low, casting pale silver light across the snow. Duke followed, Paws silent against the wooden porch. He sat beside Jack, his eyes reflecting the glow of the moon like 2 pieces of amber. Jack looked out across the valley. The chimney smoke rose straight into the still air. In the distance, the faint sound of the wind carried no threat, only memory. "You did it, Walter," Jack whispered. "You built a place that remembers how to keep people warm." He felt the dog press lightly against his leg. Duke's body was solid, dependable, a constant presence through every storm. Jack reached down, his gloved hand resting on the dog's head. "You kept me alive when I had no reason to keep walking. You found the light when I was lost." Inside, the fire flickered, and Lily stirred in her sleep. Jack turned to the table and picked up his notebook. The pages were filled with rough handwriting, sketches of the room beneath the earth, and words that spoke of survival and grace. On a fresh page, he began to write slowly, each word steady as his breath. "This house will stay open for anyone cold and weary." He paused, looking toward the window where snowflakes drifted past the glass. Then he added another line: "No one should face winter alone." Duke shifted by the door, curling into a ball, his head lifting for a moment before resting again. The steady rhythm of his breathing blended with the quiet hum from beneath the floor, the heartbeat of the room that never froze. Outside, a new dawn began to rise. The snow turned to gold under the first light. Smoke curled from the chimney into the open sky. marking a home that was no longer hidden but alive. Jack closed the notebook, set it beside the lamp, and smiled faintly. He sat for a long moment, watching the world through the window. The forest, the hills, the endless white fields, all softened under the touch of light. The house that had once saved a broken soldier and his loyal dog had now become something greater, a refuge for anyone lost in the storm. Duke lifted his head again, as if sensing the thought, and padded toward the porch. He settled at the top of the steps, his gaze steady on the snowy path that led through the woods. His fur shimmered in the pale morning light, his breath rising in soft clouds. He was the guardian of warmth now, the keeper of the door that would never close, the last line of defense between cold and kindness. Jack watched him for a long while before whispering quietly, "Keep watch, old friend. It is your house as much as mine." And as the sun climbed higher, painting the valley in gold, the cabin of Winter Haven stood as a small miracle against the vast cold world. Winter faded slowly in the valley, melting into gentle rivers that carried away the silence of snow. The trees began to breathe again, their branches whispering soft green promises of spring. From the hill above, the cabin stood like a living story, carved in wood and light. It was no longer only the hidden refuge of Walter, and no longer only the shelter where a tired soldier survived a storm. It had become something larger, a promise that warmth can live even in the coldest world. Jack Miller and Duke stayed through the changing days, tending the fire that never truly died. Travelers kept coming. Some were lost in the forest. Some were lost in their own lives. All of them were searching for a place to rest without being judged. Each person left a piece of their story behind, and the house became richer for it. The sound beneath the floor, the quiet living hum from the room under the snow, still moved through the walls. But now it carried more than heat. Now it carried the memory of kindness, the memory of faith, the memory of hands that did not let go. Jack often stood on the porch at dusk, watching the valley shine under fading light. He would look at Duke, the steady guardian at his side, and feel something he had not felt in years. He felt safe. He felt useful. He felt home. He understood that the miracle was never only the secret chamber under the ground. The true miracle was love made real in ordinary moments. A door opened, a meal shared, a child warmed back to life, a man who did not walk away. That is how healing spreads, not with noise, not with pride, with quiet loyalty, with simple goodness, with the choice to care for someone who cannot repay you. That is also how God works in this world, not always through thunder and power, but through people who carry warmth to one another when the night is cold. Final message for the listener. If you believe that warmth still matters in this world, share this story with someone who needs it. Leave your words below so others can see they are not alone. Join us. Stay with us. Subscribe to this channel so this small light can keep traveling farther than we ever could on our own. May the Lord watch over you. May He keep your home safe, your body warm, and your heart gentle. May He remind you that you are not forgotten, even in the longest winter.